There exists a group of creatures in the world that have been discovered by only a few people, but have never been confirmed to exist. We generally refer to these creatures as unidentified mysterious animals, or UMA for short, meaning unconfirmed creatures. Hello everyone, and welcome to the UMA video series. Among countless unexplained phenomena in urban legends, Bigfoot has always been a topic that captures great attention. Although mainstream academia generally believes that the wild man theory lacks scientific basis, there are still many supporters among ordinary people, along with some paleoanthropologists who believe that such a higher primate species, different from humans, does exist. And today, what I want to share with everyone is one of the most famous Bigfoot legends in the southern United States, the Fouke Monster. Also known as the Western Swamp Monster, the Swamp Stalker, or the Bigfoot of the swamp. It was named after the location where it was sighted, the town of Fouke in the state of Arkansas, USA. It is often described as an ape-like creature with red eyes, covered in reddish-brown hair, and walking upright, with an estimated height between 7 and 10 feet. Known to attack humans in their structures, it moves swiftly, and when running, its arms swing like those of a monkey. Some reports even describe it as emitting a strong, unpleasant odor, similar to the Yeti we mentioned before. There have been an extraordinary number of sightings of this creature from the beginning of the last century until now. Almost every year, there have been similar reports. According to records from the Fouke Monster Research Organization's website, as of 2021, nearly 100 official sighting cases of this creature have been documented, and the number of unofficial cases is countless. Therefore, I will try to select the most representative incidents to share with everyone. The legend of the Fouke Monster truly began spreading widely after a news report in the 1970 seconds. Although I couldn't find the original newspaper, I did find matching records from the Field Research Organization on Bigfoot and on Facebook. On Sunday, May 2nd, 1971, 5-year-old Bobby Ford was taken to St. Michael Hospital for treatment due to scratches and minor shock. Bobby stated that he and his family had been attacked by an unidentified creature. Their house was located near Highway 71, about 10 miles south of Texarkana. Since they had moved in a few days earlier, a series of strange events had continuously occurred. First, on Wednesday, his wife and sister-in-law heard something walking on the porch. At midnight, on Friday, something tried to enter the house. By the night of May 1st, they finally came face to face with it. Bobby's wife, Elizabeth Ford, recalled that she was lying on the sofa and about to take a nap when she suddenly noticed the front curtain moving strangely. Moments later, she saw a hand reach in from outside the window. At first, she thought it was a bear, but she quickly realized it wasn't. It was a strange creature covered in thick fur, with eyes glowing red like burning coals. It made no sound as it moved, yet its heavy breathing could be clearly heard. Bobby and his brothers rushed to the back of the house, fired shots at the creature, and drove it away. Afterward, they immediately contacted local police officer Ernest Walraven. He arrived around midnight, and they searched the fields and nearby woods for about an hour, but found nothing. Therefore, the officer left them a shotgun and a high-powered flashlight before leaving. The Ford family continued waiting on the porch, and before long, the creature appeared again. Gunshots rang out once more. In thinking they had hit it, everyone moved toward the creature. At that very moment, a woman's terrified scream suddenly echoed from inside the house. Bobby quickly turned back, and as he reached the porch, a large hairy hand grabbed his shoulder and slammed him to the ground. Bobby struggled desperately to break free, describing the creature as breathing heavily. With eyes about half the size of a 50-cent coin and truly red in color, he used all his strength and finally managed to escape. In panic, he ran around the house, and when he reached the front door, he didn't even open it, crashing straight through and scraping himself. By the time his brothers heard his cries and rushed over, the creature had already vanished. After receiving the report, Ernest returned again and stayed until around 5 in the morning, but the monster did not reappear. All that remained was a damaged window frame, several pieces of tin removed from beneath the house, and a few footprints and claw marks left on the porch. The footprints had a 3-toed shape. When reporter Jim Powell arrived after hearing the news, the entire Ford family was packing their belongings, preparing to move out, and at that point, it had only been 5 days since they moved in. The next day, on May 3rd, the incident made the front page of both the Texarkana Gazette and the local daily news. Powell named the creature the Fouke Monster. Shortly after, the Associated Press reissued the story, and the report caused a sensation across the United States and even around the world. For a while, the area around the house was crowded every day, with people coming to visit and search for the creature. To prevent unnecessary chaos, local police announced a ban on carrying firearms in the area, but they still couldn't stop people's curiosity. 3 weeks later, on May 24th, the Daily News reported another sighting with the headline, "Texarkana Group Spots Monster Again." The story went as follows. On the previous day, May 23rd, Mr. and Mrs. Wood and their aunt, Mrs. Sade Gus, were returning home from the city of Felbert. When they passed a section of Highway 71 south of the Ford residence, they saw an unusual creature crossing the road. They described the creature as not appearing very tall because it was walking hunched over as it moved. Its arms swung like a monkey's, and its body was massive. Mr. Wood said he thought he might hit it because he couldn't brake in time, but to his surprise, it crossed the road very quickly, not even paying attention to the car or looking in their direction. From a certain angle, the creature looked like a giant ape covered in black fur, but its weight was estimated to exceed 200 pounds. After the report was published, the very next day, major newspapers across the country released similar articles, sparking a wave of monster hunts for the Fouke monster throughout the region. Local police even offered a $1,290 reward for capturing the creature of legend, while a Little Rock City radio station offered an additional $1,090 in hopes of easing the pressure on public authorities. On June 13th of the same year, a farmer named Willie Smith discovered footprints in his cotton field about 150 meters from his home. The footprints measured 13.5 inches long and 5.7 inches wide, having only 3 toes, and, interestingly, the creature seemed to have deliberately avoided stepping on the crops. With the help of law enforcement officers, the footprints were cast and made into plaster molds. Later, Smith even made several replicas to sell in his own cafe. However, as the search craze gradually faded, the public's interest in the creature also diminished. Until August 8th, 1972, when a horror documentary directed by Charles Pierce, titled The Legend of Boggy Creek, premiered in the United States, making the story of the Fouke Monster spread across every street and alley. The director personally interviewed residents around the Fouke area, collecting testimonies and clues about the creature dating from the 1940s to the early 1970s. One of the most famous incidents was that of James Lynn Crabtree, who saw the creature in 1965 when he was only 14 years old. At that time, he was chasing a squirrel when he suddenly noticed something strange and hairy. When the monster noticed him, it let out fierce growls and hissing sounds, and Crabtree panicked, fired 3 quick shots, and ran frantically back home. There were also reports of people seeing the creature washing its feet by a lake. Livestock were reportedly attacked and dragged away, along with many other similar cases. Most of the actors in the film were actual local residents. Among them was the real-life farmer Willie Smith, who had discovered the footprints and played himself in the film. The movie also reenacted the entire 1,971 incident. Most of the footage we've seen over the years actually came from this production. Notably, the film's production budget was only $160,000, yet it grossed over $20 million at the box office, an astonishing amount for that time. Here, I'd also like to recommend everyone to watch this movie if possible. Though it lacks flashy special effects or sharp visuals, it makes up for it with rich and compelling storytelling. Its documentary-style filmmaking delivers a strong sense of realism and tension to the audience. The film's influence lasted for about 2 years. From 1975 onward, news about the Fouke Monster gradually faded from public attention. Although isolated incidents still occurred, they no longer caused the same sensation as before. In 2012, American author Lyle Blackburn published The Beast of Boggy Creek, which compiled nearly all available articles and documents about similar events and identified that the earliest recorded sighting of the Fouke Monster could be traced back to 1851 in the June 1851 issue of the Memphis Inquirer. There was an article titled "A Strange and Thrilling Story." It mentioned that 2 hunters in Greene County, eastern Arkansas, saw a herd of cattle running wildly as if something was chasing them. As the herd passed by, they saw a creature shaped like a human, with a muscular body covered in hair and long hair hanging down its neck and shoulders. The creature stared at them for a moment and then quickly ran away. The footprints it left behind were as long as 13 inches. The second record came from March 1,856 inches, the Caddo Parish region, where a reporter saw a group of men attempting to capture a wild man. He described the creature as looking like a strong athlete, about 6 feet 4 inches tall, covered in reddish-brown hair, moving as swiftly as a deer as it ran up the riverbank. The hunters didn't intend to shoot it, but wanted to capture it alive. But as soon as it saw the horses and riders, the creature went berserk and attacked. It pulled one hunter to the ground and frantically clawed at him, even gouging out one of his eyes and tearing his shoulder with its teeth. Finally, it grabbed the reins, tore off the saddle and straps, and released the horse. Then it seized the reins of another horse, mounted it, and galloped across the field, disappearing without a trace. Although I couldn't find the original versions of these 2 articles, I was able to locate reprinted copies published in other newspapers from the same period. There were also a few similar records, showing that as early as the 19th century, there had already been sporadic reports about the Arkansas wild man. According to the materials I found, in more recent times, the Fouke Monster has taken on a highly entertaining nature since the 1980 seconds. Its image and story have appeared more frequently in movies and media. In addition to major articles, there were numerous remakes and original films heavily promoted, but the most notable were documentaries and mockumentaries produced by major television networks in the 21st century, such as Monster Quest, Finding Bigfoot on Animal Planet, and Weird Travels on the Travel Channel. Among them, we can take the example of the paranormal documentary series Monsters and Mysteries in America. In its first season, aired in 2013, the show retold the story of the Fouke Monster. The production team cited 2 recent sighting reports. The first occurred around 6 p.m. one evening in September 2011. A young woman named Sissy Owen went to her friend's house to work on a thesis together. She clearly remembered that her friend's dog had been barking non-stop for over 20 minutes. Around midnight, Owen drove home along a narrow road. As she passed a farm, she noticed something crouching in the tall grass by the roadside. When the car's headlights hit it, the figure suddenly stood upright. Owen described it as a monster with a chest about 3 feet wide and standing roughly 8 feet tall. The creature glanced around and then quickly darted into the bushes on the opposite side of the road. Realizing the danger, Owen hurriedly rolled up and locked all the car windows, but she forgot to close the sunroof. A large hairy hand reached down through the sunroof, trying to grab her, but she managed to dodge it. The darkness made it impossible for her to see the full shape of the creature. The only thing she could do was start the engine and drive away immediately. The second incident happened on a day in 2004. A local hunter named Doyle Holmes rowed his boat deep into the swamp around 6 a.m. to hunt. The fog was thick that morning, and he faintly heard splashing sounds coming from the shore. As he got closer, a huge figure emerged from the bushes. He realized it was a two-legged creature, tall and massive, occasionally letting out a deep growl. It seemed to be searching for something in the water, constantly splashing up columns of water. After a while, the creature ran up to the bank, headed deeper into the forest, and disappeared. The story didn't end there. On Thanksgiving Day, that same year, after celebrating, Doyle and his family planned to take his son into the forest to hunt wild boars. They went to the same area where he had seen the creature before and began tracking signs of prey nearby. Soon his son discovered several giant footprints around them. As an experienced hunter, Doyle had seen all kinds of animal tracks, but the ones before him were clearly different from anything he had ever encountered. At that very moment, a terrifying series of roars suddenly echoed from the nearby bushes. It sounded unlike any wild boar or human voice they had ever heard. They could clearly see something enormous and unbelievable moving through the undergrowth. But the creature showed no sign of aggression toward them and quickly vanished deep into the forest. 2 days later, Doyle returned to the forest and used plaster to cast the footprint. In his later hunting trips, he also discovered several similar tracks, leading him to believe that there might be more than one of these creatures. Finally, let's look into a recent report. On October 22nd, 2023, a local television station released a 5-minute video report as part of its interview series about the Fouke Monster. The segment mentioned a woman named Reba Gillian. She stated that she first saw the creature when she was a child. That night she saw the monster while riding in a car. The creature stood about 7.5 to 8 feet tall. Gillian's first reaction was to scream and pound on the window to try to make her parents stop the car. But since she was a child, her parents chose not to believe her. From that day on, she never dared to enter that forest again. The production crew also interviewed Danny Roberts, the founder of the local monster Mart. He bought the building in 1984, which at first was just a small diner. A few years later, as more and more people came searching for the monster, his brother suggested renaming it Fouke Monster Mart. Today, it has become a gathering place for clues and stories about the creature. Danny vividly remembered a time when people brought hunting rifles and dogs breaking fences in hopes of finding the monster. But in the end, they never found anything. Similarly, Danny himself has never seen the Fouke Monster, but his younger brother, Ricky Roberts, provided an audio clip he accidentally recorded in the woods. In the local area, there are still many people like the Roberts brothers who tirelessly search for and study this mysterious beast. For instance, Bigfoot researcher William Lunsford. After first seeing the Bigfoot creature in 1977, he became deeply fascinated by the subject. He firmly believes that the Fouke Monster lives in the forests of Miller County and provided the team with materials supporting its existence, most of which consisted of stacked piles of branches and preserved footprints. Indeed, the flood of reports has led many to believe that a large primate species, distinct from humans, truly lives in the swamps around Fouke. However, at the same time, some scholars and skeptics continue to express opposing views. As early as 1971, after the Ford family incident caused a sensation, American archaeologist Frank Schambach raised doubts about the discovered footprints. First, he argued that the prints could not belong to the ape-like creature people had reported seeing because they only had 3 toes, whereas all primates, including early humans, have 5 toes. In addition, all apes are diurnal animals, while the monster, described in the reports, was said to be mainly nocturnal. Most importantly, no wild primate species had ever been found in this region, and the local environment was unsuitable for their survival. According to an Associated Press report from 1986, Fouke Monster incidents had become extremely rare during that period. At that time, Miller County Deputy Sheriff Phillips stated that he hadn't received any such report calls for years. The local authorities no longer even kept related records. Fouke Mayor Virgil Roberts believed the creature was entirely a product of exaggeration, suggesting that perhaps someone had walked around on stilts to draw attention to the area and profit from it. He said that maybe some people had truly seen something, but what they imagined seeing was much more than what actually existed. However, the dollars made from the monster were very real. For example, Virgil's wife used plaster to make miniature casts of the monster's footprints and sold them to merchants for 50 cents each. Of course, the giant ape man theory remained quite popular. Fossils of Gigantopithecus have been discovered in China, India, and Vietnam. American anthropologist Grover Sanders Krantz proposed that America's Bigfoot might be a descendant of Gigantopithecus that migrated from Southeast Asia across the Bering Land Bridge into the Americas, evolving into its own population. However, the issue with this theory is that no Gigantopithecus fossils have ever been found anywhere in the Americas. As for Gigantopithecus itself, those interested can refer to the previous video about the Yeti. American paranormal investigator Joe Nickell, in the Skeptical Inquirer magazine at the end of 2015, summarized several cases involving humanoid creatures, such as the Fouke Monster, Missouri's Momo, Illinois' White Phantom, and others. He argued that these creatures should all be defined as misinterpretations of large mammals, such as bears. Nickell noted that when bears stand upright on their hind legs, they become what people call the North American Bigfoot. Of course, aside from the people caught wearing Bigfoot costumes, many of the behaviors and features attributed to Bigfoot sightings were also very similar to bears, such as scratching tree bark, walking awkwardly, and emitting a strong odor. Moreover, many of the reported sighting locations coincided with bear territories. Regarding the Fouke Monster, Nickell cited the case of Lynn, as the witness described the creature standing upright and sniffing around, with reddish-brown fur, which matched perfectly with bears that have cinnamon-colored fur. The American black bear is a medium-sized bear species, native to North America. It has a round head, small ears, strong limbs, and great physical strength. It typically inhabits mountainous regions with dense vegetation and has been recorded across most of the North American continent. Although it is called the black bear, its fur color varies widely, ranging from white to golden, cinnamon, light brown, dark brown, and black. The largest recorded specimen in recent years measured 7 feet 11 inches long and weighed 1,100 pounds. Nickell believed that the monster's sniffing behavior and most of the descriptions of its movements matched perfectly with the sensory habits and territorial behavior of bears. In 2014, American skeptic writer Brian Dunning analyzed the Fouke Monster case on his blog. First, he reviewed the timeline of the most famous incidents. The Ford family case happened in 1971. Powell's report appeared to be the first newspaper article in the world describing a wild man in the Fouke Swamp area. The film was released in 1972, and it devoted much of its runtime to depicting sightings from the 1,960 seconds and even earlier. Yet those earlier events had never been reported before. Brian argued that all of it stemmed from one highly imaginative creator, director Charles Pierce, who likely took advantage of the local residents' eagerness to be on camera and encouraged them to exaggerate various imagined scenes. Therefore, those accounts were unreliable. Moreover, Lyle Blackburn did uncover at least two 19th century articles about wild men, but both reports originated from the opposite end of Arkansas, at least 400 kilometers away from the Fouke Swamp. Finally, there was the issue of the footprints. The Monster Mart's collection contained a large number of plaster cast footprint models, but there was very little evidence identifying where those casts were originally made. If the original casting site could be found, only then could a proper scientific investigation determine whether they were hoaxes. Besides, we know that the original footprints had 3 toes, but over time, the newly found prints became clearer and more similar to gorilla footprints. However, once the 3-toed trait had become an established motif of the Fouke Monster, a new wave of sightings began showing ostrich-like footprints. Overall, nearly all evidence of the Fouke Monster cannot be verified. It seems to align only with local folklore. The image of a hairy man exists in almost every culture's records, and the Fouke Monster just happens to play that role in Arkansas. Ultimately, from a personal perspective, I still lean toward Professor Brian's viewpoint. Although I believe that the existence of a wild man species is relatively possible, when it comes to the Fouke Monster specifically, I find it unconvincing. First of all, the 1971 Ford family incident. Based on reports from that year, the police found no tangible evidence of any violent monster attack. The traces found at the scene were not as serious as described by the witnesses. Moreover, all 3 claimed to have shot the creature, but I found no reports mentioning any traces of blood. Even more suspiciously, after the Ford family moved away, they never gave a single interview, as if they had vanished, while the so-called eyewitnesses featured in the film received far more attention. In fact, when I tried to trace the origins of certain historical events, I encountered many difficulties. Most of the articles on the Fouke Monster website in the archives of Bigfoot organizations lacked any identifiable original sources, perhaps due to my limited access permissions regarding the Fouke Monster. While newspapers and archives do contain numerous summary records, much of the content is repetitive, and entertainment-oriented news accounts for a significant portion. After the success of the Legend of Boggy Creek, the 1977 sequel, Boggy Creek Sec, and The Legend Continues, was released, following the original storyline, followed by The Legend Continues in 1985. The Wild Man of the Navidad, Legend, and Boggy Creek. The Legend is True in 2010, among others. Even the original Legend of Boggy Creek was restored and re-released in 2016. If you search for information about the Fouke Monster, most of what you'll find are promotional articles for these films. What puzzles me is the attitude of certain cryptozoologists toward the Fouke Monster. In the Field Guide to Bigfoot, published by Professor Loren Coleman in 1999, he referred to the humanoid creatures reported in the 1,960 seconds as nape-like beings, a type of chimpanzee-like creature said to inhabit the Mississippi River Basin and its swampy tributary networks. Yet by the 21st century, his views on his blog became more ambiguous. Furthermore, in the works of the father of cryptozoology, Professor Bernard Heuvelmans, there was never any mention of such a creature. It seems more like an urban legend that suddenly emerged. This is also one of the reasons why I find it unconvincing. Moreover, almost every expert on the Fouke Monster is self-proclaimed. For example, the author mentioned earlier, who also runs the Fouke Monster website, is Lyle Blackburn. He has published 3 books on the Fouke Monster and appeared in various documentaries, lectures, interviews, and events. However, Lyle's more prominent identity is that of a musician and songwriter. Since the 1980 seconds, he has been active in the music industry as a vocalist and lead guitarist. And although he has compiled a large collection of materials and reports about the Fouke Monster, he himself has never seen the creature. It must be said that Lyle has gained considerable fame and profit from the Fouke Monster, but no one really knows how much of it is exaggerated. Of course, in modern times, the most popular attraction remains the Monster Mart mentioned earlier. Like Lyle, the store's owner has also never seen the creature. Yet, the store is filled with displays claiming to be evidence of the monster's existence, with an even greater variety of merchandise and memorabilia. Every explorer and online blogger drawn by the monster legend visits this shop to check in, to the point that it has become one of the town's landmark attractions. Consequently, the shop owner has made quite a fortune. Overall, I believe the entertainment value of the Fouke Monster has far surpassed its original mysterious allure. Its legend has brought a tremendous transformation to the local tourism industry. There is even a festival dedicated entirely to the Fouke Monster, focused on discussions and interpretations of the creature, with proceeds going toward local scholarship funds. Similar to the Mothman, the Fouke Monster is a highly successful example of regional tourism branding. Of course, everything above is merely my personal speculation and interpretation. Whether the Fouke Monster truly exists in those swamps remains a question that only time and humanity's continued exploration of nature can answer. Ultimately, as the saying goes, the unknown will always be greater than the known. And that is the true charm of Uma. That's all for today's video. Thank you for watching.